Chevo, more and more Aussie households are choosing between keeping the lights on and vital medical care, according to a new report from Energy Consumers Australia. 21% of households say they have been unable to afford essentials such as rent, mortgage or non-bulk bill medical treatment in favour of paying their power bills, and 62% are avoiding air conditioning or heating in order to save money. For their take, let's bring in Sunshine Coast Mayor Rosanna Natoli and Logan City Mayor John Raven. Morning to you, Rosanna. If people are choosing between electricity and keeping warm, what do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no way that electricity, energy, should be considered a luxury item. It is an absolute essential. And also, it is really difficult to find out if you're on the best deal. And that should be made simpler. It shouldn't take a finance degree, 3 comparison websites and a whole afternoon to work out if you're on the best rate for your electricity. And that is one of the things, because if you're loyal and you stay with the same company, then you're probably paying too much, is what the experts say. So there's a lot in this. The governments and the energy regulators need to make sure that energy is absolutely available, and you shouldn't have to go without medicine or food. No, non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's a huge concern, isn't it, John? Electricity costs increased 21% from May, largely because of those rebates coming to an end. We know rebates don't last forever. We know the government can't keep propping everyone up. It's just too expensive, isn't it?
That's right. All 3 levels of government are working to lower the cost of living on people. And Rosanna and I see that as much as anyone else do as mayors. We know that even a tiny increase in people's costs make it so much harder for them, because there's a lot of people who are doing it tough, but there's a really big cohort of Australians who are right on the edge, and any cost makes a huge difference. And like Rosanna said, if you're trying to get your kids to school, you're probably working 6 days a week, you're doing everything you can to make ends meet. When you finally get a moment to yourself, the expectation of these retailers is that you're going to sit down and then make sure that they're not fleecing you on your valuable downtime. That's not good for your mental health, and we shouldn't be punished as Australians for loyalty. I still shop at the same supermarket that my mum did. They should be rewarding you for loyalty, not punishing you, and it's just completely unfair and un-Australian that when we're all doing it tough, energy retailers are just trying to line their pockets.
Yeah, and it feels like any of the answers are years away, so you can see people's frustration, can't you? Moving on, Victorian opposition leader Jess Wilson has vowed to crack down on travel entitlements if she becomes Premier and limit taxpayer-funded travel to domestic trips only. It comes after a number of her own coalition colleagues spent tens of thousands of dollars on overseas visits before announcing their retirement from politics just a few days after arriving home. Rosanna.
It doesn't pass the pub test, does it? No. When you are talking about travelling overseas and then retiring. If you're going to go anywhere on the taxpayer dollar, it needs to be answering this question. Is it genuinely in the public interest? Is whoever is funding that trip actually going to gain a benefit? And if you come back and then retire, I think the answer is no.
Yeah, what do you think about this, John? One of the former Treasurer went on a trip to New York and Hong Kong, spent over $8,000, was going to, meet with all sorts of lawmakers, was going to walk the High Line, which, if you go to New York, most people do that themselves. And one of his quotes was, "We are keen to meet the owners of an Aussie pub and the managers to get a first-hand brief on how New Yorkers view Victoria and Melbourne." In what universe, John, do you think that would be acceptable, to spend taxpayers' funds to do that?
There's no universe where that's okay, Nat. And whenever people travel, when public officials travel, the first question I get is, couldn't that have just been a Teams meeting?
Yeah.
Hamish and Andy's pub over in New York might be a great place to visit, but it doesn't meet the pub test to travel halfway around the world to do it. What frustrates me, though, and I'm sure it frustrates Victorians, is that Jess Wilson doesn't need to make integrity an election commitment. She's the leader of her party now. She should be calling on those people who have gone cynically on a trip overseas and then retired months later to pay that back. That is the expectations that ratepayers would have if we had that happen in Logan. I think that's the expectation of all Australians, that if you've taken the mickey, if you've gone on a trip and then retired, you've got to give that money back to taxpayers because they're struggling to make ends meet and you're spending it on luxury trips to places like New York and Hong Kong.
Yeah, well, shouldn't there be an audit, Rosanna, to see who's done this, and can't we get them to pay it back? It seems like a good place to start.
Yeah, well, I think if you are spending public money and then you're actually not able to show that it has been for the benefit of the public, then you should have to pay that back and you should be actually called out for it.
Finally, a mum has taken her parenting dilemma to social media, asking whether she should replace a toy lost by her 9-year-old daughter or use it as a teachable moment on responsibility. Now, she says her child saved up, spent her own $10 for a Hello Kitty plush. Then she lost it the same day that it was bought. John, people were divided on whether she should just replace it or whether she should use it as a teachable moment and say, oh, well, shouldn't have left it there. What do you think?
It's a tough one, and there's going to be a few parents who aren't going to agree with me on this one, but it's a very teachable moment, especially for something that's brand new. So you've saved up, you've gotten something brand new, and you've lost it the same day. If that had happened to me, that's probably 2 or 3 weeks of pocket money for that little girl. Imagine if an adult lost something that cost 2 or 3 weeks of their pay. They wouldn't just go out and replace it straight away. They'd have to wait. They'd have to work back up again to be able to afford that. Now, I have a different version, though. If it's I know it's hardcore, but there's a different one. If it's a long-term toy, my kids had this little giraffe called Sophie. They couldn't sleep without it. If they lost a Sophie, I had backups ready to go because it was not worth the trauma for them or for me to not be able to sleep because they lost their blankie, their lovely plush toy.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If it's a new toy, learn from it. If it's an old toy,
this is selfish because it impacted you. Rosanna, what do you think?
I would definitely go and buy it again because, yes, there is a responsibility lesson here, but the lesson could also be grace. You know that this was a toy, you've put it down, you've lost it. Let's work on a plan to make sure it doesn't happen again. Let's use that as the lesson rather than the cruelty of that trauma. Forever, she would have a Hello Kitty trauma, and that is way too much.
Okay, teachable moment.
Save up and buy a new one, mate. It's
or
fine.
trauma. Tell us what you would do. Thank you. See you next week. Here's Sherbo.